Some men go fishing when they retire. Some play golf. Me? I watch china plates. Not by choice, mind you. I never cared about the damn things. But when you've been married to the same woman for 35 years, you learn to spot the shifts, the odd little ripples that say the current's about to change. Name's Robert. 68. Semi-retired from a nice little insurance agency I built from scratch. Paid off the house. Joined the local garden club with my wife, Celeste, so she wouldn't have to go alone. Figured I'd earned a quiet life. Turns out quiet's just another word for blind if you're not paying attention. It started with the china cabinet. Celeste always loved her china. Wedding gifts, inheritance pieces, odds and ends from estate sales. An eclectic collection, sure, but every plate had its place. Then one Thursday morning, she started rearranging. Not just dusting. Full-on obsessed. Plates shuffled, cups relocated, silver polished until it gleamed like a mirror. I watched from my reading chair, one brow raised. You expecting the queen? I asked. She laughed, a little too high, a little too fast. Just freshening things up for the garden club meeting. I grunted, went back to my paper. But that night, I noticed something strange. The crown jewel of the collection, a Wedgwood Jasperware plate, pale blue with white bas-relief, was gone. I knew that plate. Celeste babied it like a newborn. Always front and center. Now? Empty space. I waited until she was brushing her hair. Where's the Wedgwood? I asked casually. She blinked. Oh, it's out for repair. Tiny crack. You probably wouldn't have noticed. I nodded. Let it go. But my gut? It twisted. The next clue came a week later. Celeste attended a private garden dinner, women only, she said. I declined, preferring to tinker in the garage. She came home late, glowing. A little too flushed, perfume clinging stronger than usual. Odd. I said nothing. Next morning, scrolling the local garden club's Facebook page, which I rarely do, a new post caught my eye. Photos from the dinner. Celeste, front and center, laughing beside a tall, silver-haired gin I recognized as Martin Hughes. Wealthy real estate guy. Widower, allegedly. But it wasn't him that caught my breath. It was the table behind them, set for dinner. And right in the middle, my Wedgwood plate. No crack. No flaw. Perfect. I stared at the screen, heart cold. It wasn't out for repair. It was out on display. At another man's house. I sat back, mind racing. Now, I could have confronted her then. Shouted. Accused. But that's not my style. Insurance taught me one thing: document everything first. Build the case airtight. Over the next few weeks, I watched. And oh, the clues came easy. A silver candlestick vanished. Then a pair of Waterford crystal goblets. A vintage linen table runner, gone. Always the same pattern. She'd leave for club events, come back light, humming, eyes bright. And when I checked the house, more treasures had slipped away. I even started photographing the shelves when she wasn't looking, comparing before and after. The evidence piled up fast. And always, Martin Hughes was in the background. At every event she just had to attend. I dug a little deeper quietly, of course. Turns out Martin wasn't so widowed after all. Estranged, yes. But his wife, Clarissa, still held legal claim to half his estate. And here was my Celeste, helping him decorate on the sly. I could have gone to Clarissa then. But no. Timing, my friend, is everything. The club's big annual garden party was coming up. Biggest event of the year. Full turnout. Press coverage. And guess who was hosting? Clarissa Hughes. Now that was a stage worthy of a proper reveal. I started preparing. Carefully collected each photographed item that had vanished. Traced receipts, matched dates. Built a tidy little thank you box, labeled, itemized. And sat back, smiling. Because some betrayals deserve more than private shame. They deserve a standing ovation. The first time I stood in front of that china cabinet with a camera in my hand, I actually chuckled at myself. Robert Masters, former agency partner, two-term Rotary president, reduced to photographing dinnerware like some noir detective in a department store. But in this town, the one thing worse than being made a fool is not having proof of it. So I documented everything. Every piece. Every shelf. Every tarnish and scratch I knew by heart. And then, as Celeste's club obligations grew more frequent, so did the gaps in the shelves. A pair of Limoges saucers. A baccarat vase. The Waterford goblets that had survived 3 moves and a Thanksgiving debacle with her sister's clumsy husband. Gone. Each time, the same song and dance. Oh, I'm taking it to be appraised. Oh, it's getting a little cleaning. Oh, I lent it to Francine. She just adores those goblets. Francine? When I saw her at the grocery store? Goblets? What goblets? I kept quiet. Because the more she talked, the more she tangled herself in her own web. The next photo clue came at a garden tour. Celeste insisted I skip it. You'll be bored, darling. It's all soil composition and pest-resistant hybrids. Right. But I happened to glance at the club's Instagram feed that evening, and there it was. A casual snapshot of Martin Hughes's sunroom. And in the background, glittering on a glass side table, one of our baccarat vases, unmistakable with its etched base. The caption? Another lovely evening at Martin's. Another, indeed. The old insurance instincts kicked in hard. This wasn't an affair born of passion. It was a transaction. A slow, calculated bleed of our home into his. I knew I had to act. But not yet. Timing mattered. A week later, Celeste mentioned offhand, Clarissa Hughes is hosting this year's garden gala. Can you believe it? After all that mess with Martin. I blinked. Mess. Oh. You know, lawyers, paperwork. She still technically owns half his estate, but he's charming as ever. Can't blame her for being civil. Civil? My foot. Clarissa Hughes was no shrinking violet. She'd stayed out of the public eye for a while, but word was she and Martin had reached a truce, more of a cold war than peace. And now she was hosting the event of the year. That was my cue. I began assembling the thank you box. Labeled each item with a discreet tag. Wedgwood Jasperware plate. Pair of Waterford goblets. Baccarat vase. Limoges saucers. Vintage linen runner. Each tag included a little note, loaned by Celeste Masters, via Mr. Martin Hughes's residence. No accusation. Just facts. I even printed the Instagram photo, discreetly cropped to highlight the vase. And I wrapped the whole thing in elegant garden-themed paper with a bow. Sometimes, revenge tastes sweeter when served with impeccable manners. As the gala approached, Celeste grew more manic. New dresses. New hat. New pearls. It's going to be the event of the season, she gushed. I smiled. I'm sure it will. The night of the party, I dressed sharp, a charcoal suit, navy tie. Understated. Carried the box like a gift. At the door, Clarissa greeted each guest herself, gracious as ever. When we approached, her eyes flickered to the box. Oh, Robert, how thoughtful. I smiled. Just a little something. Might be enlightening. She arched a brow but took it with a nod. Celeste looked puzzled. What's that, darling? Just a thank you for Clarissa, I said smoothly. We moved into the garden, tables blooming with floral centerpieces, strings of lights twinkling overhead. The perfect stage. I mingled. Observed. Watched Celeste orbit Martin like a moth to flame. And then the moment. Clarissa, ever the queen of timing, called for attention as dessert was served. I'd like to thank you all for coming, she began. And a special thanks to Robert Masters for this most revealing gift. Heads turned. She unwrapped the box at the front of the garden, lifted the first plate, my Wedgwood. Gasps. A few murmured, Isn't that Celeste's? Clarissa's voice rang clear. It seems some treasures from our community have been finding their way into unexpected places. She held up the baccarat vase next, cue the photo projected discreetly behind her. The same sunroom shot. Martin's face drained. Celeste froze, color rising. Clarissa smiled thinly. I do believe some apologies may be in order. The crowd buzzed, a hive of whispers and stares. Celeste turned to me, eyes wild. You did this? She hissed. I sipped my champagne, just returning what was never yours to give. Martin tried to speak, Clarissa cut him dead with a glance. This, she said crisply, ends now. And with that, she raised her glass. To honesty, may it always outshine deception. I joined the toast. Because in that moment, beneath the twinkling lights and the stunned silence, the truth had bloomed brighter than any flower in that garden. You'd think a polite public undressing would buy a man a little peace. Turns out, in this town, it just buys you a front row seat to the rest of the show. After Clarissa unveiled my little thank you box at the gala, God bless her, the garden club world exploded like a bag of dry leaves under a magnifying glass. By the next morning, the club's group chat was on fire. Screenshots made their rounds faster than cold cuts at a potluck. My phone buzzed nonstop. Robert, did you really? Robert, I just have to say, bravo. Robert, how could you? My favorite came from old Mrs. Peabody, 93 and sharper than her shears. Well played. Tease on me next week. And Celeste? She disappeared. Gone before sunrise. Didn't sleep in our bed that night. Didn't leave a note. I found her car parked at Francine's house the next morning, Francine being her sister, the kind who'd gossip in one breath and deny it in the next. Did I call her? No. You don't interrupt an artist when they're processing their first bad review. Instead, I poured myself a coffee, sat on the porch, and watched the fallout roll in. By noon, Martin Hughes himself showed up. In a $500 blazer and a $5 sweat. I heard his tires crunch the gravel before he knocked. Opened the door to find him standing there, pale, a forced smile on his face. "Robert," he began, "I think we need to talk." I leaned against the frame. "Talk away." He cleared his throat. "That display at the gala, a bit theatrical, don't you think?" I raised an eyebrow. "Theatrics are for the unproven." Everything in that box had provenance. He flushed. "Look, I didn't know Celeste was bringing those things. I never asked for it." I held up a hand. "Save it, Martin. You may not have asked, but you didn't say no when your dining room started looking like my damn living room." He shifted, I starting. "It's all a misunderstanding." "No," I said flatly. "A misunderstanding is grabbing the wrong coat at a party. This was theft. And lies." He opened his mouth. I smiled. "And before you ask, no, I'm not suing. I got what I wanted. The truth, under glass, for everyone to see." He deflated. "Clarissa's furious," he muttered. I chuckled. "She should be. You're lucky she limited herself to a box and a toast." He looked at me, something desperate in his eyes. "What happens now?" I stepped back. "Now? You clean up your house. I clean up mine. And Celeste?" I shrugged. "She's your headache, not mine." I closed the door before he could answer. Watched him slink back to his car. By evening, the local Facebook groups were ablaze. Memes. Jokes. The thank you box was officially the talk of the town. Even got a mention on the regional news site. Headline, Garden Gala Drama. Antique affair unveiled. Subhead, local couple's quiet feud spills into public eye. Quiet, my foot. The next day, Celeste finally called. No apology. No remorse. Just venom. "You humiliated me," she hissed. I sipped my coffee. "You did that yourself. I just provided the soundtrack." "You're vile," she spat. "And you're a terrible thief," I replied calmly. She sucked in a breath. "You think you've won? You think you're so clever?" I smiled. "I don't need to be clever. I just need to be thorough." She was silent a moment. Then, softer. "You've ruined my life." I leaned back. "No, Celeste. You ruined your own life. I just made sure the curtains were open." She hung up. Didn't hear from her for 3 days. When she finally resurfaced, it was at the club's emergency board meeting. I wasn't invited, not a member anymore, by choice. But word traveled. Clarissa, it turned out, had saved more than my box. She had photos, emails, a neat little packet documenting just how many members' borrowed items had found their way into Martin's home. Not just mine. 3 other women came forward. Club bylaws are strict about such things. By the end of the meeting, Celeste was voted out. Suspended indefinitely. Public statement released. That night, I found a note slid under my door. Her handwriting. "Congratulations. You've destroyed me. I hope you're proud." I poured a bourbon, sat on the porch, watched the stars, and thought, no, not proud. Just done. Sometimes, it's not about winning. It's about ending the game so decisively that no one dares set the board again. And Celeste? She'd flipped her last tile. But one twist still remained, one move even I hadn't seen coming. And when it landed, it would crack this little porcelain world wide open. There's a peculiar calm that settles in after the storm, not peace, exactly. More like the quiet hum of a town trying very hard not to look directly at the wreckage. By the Monday after the garden gala, Celeste's name was on more lips than a county fair blue ribbon pie. But she wasn't basking in the attention. Oh no. She was holed up at Francine's place, if the whispered sightings were true. And Clarissa? Well, Clarissa was enjoying herself. She sent me a thank you note. Handwritten. Elegant. "Robert, for your clarity, your courage, and your unmatched sense of timing, my deepest thanks. The rest of the pieces are already in motion." I'll admit, that last line caught my eye. What pieces? I didn't have to wonder long. That Wednesday, over lunch at the club's less formal bistro, one I still frequented, I got the first hint. Doris Whitmore, a woman who could outgarden anyone in town, leaned in over her soup. "You hear about the Hughes estate?" she whispered. I shook my head, sipping my coffee. Clarissa filed for full financial audit. Claims Martin's been hiding assets. I arched a brow. Assets like Borrowed china? She grinned. Among other things. Rumor is, she's got evidence of a pattern, and your little box helped seal the narrative. I leaned back. So that's what Clarissa meant. This wasn't just personal vindication. It was legal leverage. By Thursday, the club's board had officially suspended Celeste, pending further review. Unofficially, she was done. Her social circle shrank faster than a cheap sweater in hot water. Even Francine, according to one source, was reconsidering her hospitality. I let the week roll on. Didn't reach out. Didn't respond to her sparse, frantic texts. Please, we need to talk. You don't understand what's happening. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Of course she didn't. No one means for the avalanche to start. They just keep kicking snow off the ledge. But the real twist came Friday evening. Doorbell rang just after sunset. I opened it to find Clarissa herself, dressed impeccably, a manila envelope in hand. May I? She asked. I stepped aside. She settled onto my porch swing like a queen returning to her throne. Handed me the envelope. Thought you should see this, she said simply. Inside, a series of documents. Photos. Affidavits. Proof that Martin had been funneling not just borrowed decor, but club funds. Small amounts, masked as event expenses. And Celeste? Right in the ledger. Reimbursed for consultation fees. I whistled low. You planning to take this public? I asked. She smiled thinly. Already in motion. But I wanted you to know your contribution was pivotal. I met her gaze. And Celeste? Her smile faded slightly. She'll face consequences. Legal ones, likely. But more than that, social exile. The Garden Club takes integrity very seriously. I nodded. Good. Clarissa rose. One more thing, she said, pausing. She pulled a small, familiar object from her purse. My Wedgwood plate. I believe this belongs to you. She handed it over. I took it gently, turning it in the fading light. No crack. No flaw. Just as it had always been. Thank you, I said quietly. She inclined her head. Sometimes, she said, voice cool, the best revenge isn't loud. It's permanent. And with that, she left. I sat there a long time after, turning the plate in my hands, thinking about permanence, about trust, about how a single crack, even an invisible one, can change everything. And somewhere out there, I knew Celeste was learning that lesson the hard way. The garden was blooming again. But some things, once uprooted, never take root the same way twice. I used to think there was a natural order to things in our little corner of suburbia. Affairs happened behind lace curtains. Rumors circulated in whispers over trimmed hedges. And the public face stayed smooth as polished silver. Turns out, when you tilt the plate just right, you can see every smudge. By the time Clarissa handed me back my Wedgwood plate, the whole town had seen through Celeste's act. But I suspected we weren't done yet. People like Celeste don't surrender quietly. They bargain. They beg. They burn bridges if it buys them a moment's dignity. So when the doorbell rang late Sunday afternoon, I already knew who it would be. Celeste. Pale. Disheveled. Eyes ringed in dark circles. Francine hovered behind her, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. I opened the door slowly. Celeste spoke first. Robert, please. We need to talk. I glanced at Francine. You part of this little intervention? Francine sighed. I drove her here. She insisted. Celeste clutched her purse like a lifeline. Please, Robert. Just 5 minutes. I stepped aside. 5 minutes. Not a second more. She entered, glancing nervously around the living room, as if expecting Clarissa to pop out of a closet. Francine lingered by the door, arms folded. We sat. Celeste leaned forward, voice trembling. I never meant for any of this to happen. I didn't think. I cut in. That's the problem. You didn't think. Tears welled up. I was lonely. You were always in your books, your shop, your life. I kept my gaze flat. You found companionship in another man's house. And when that wasn't enough, you furnished it with stolen memories. She shook her head desperately. I didn't steal. I was going to bring everything back. I snorted. After you cracked half the club's trust? After you and Martin siphoned club funds under event expenses? Her face blanched. You know about that? Clarissa does. And she's very good at sharing. Francine spoke up, voice tight. I told her to come clean, Robert. I warned her. Celeste's tears spilled over. I'm facing charges now. Clarissa's lawyer sent notice. Martin's cut me off. I have nothing. I leaned back. And you think this is my problem because... She gripped the purse tighter. I want to come home. A beat. Then I laughed. low and bitter. You want to come home to what, Celeste? A house you gutted piece by piece. She reached out, desperate. I made mistakes. I lost myself. But we have history, Robert. We have 35 years. I rose slowly. 35 years didn't give you the right to lie, or to drag my name through the mud when your schemes collapsed. Her sob turned raw. I'm sorry. Please. I'll do anything. I shook my head. You've already done enough. The door's behind you. Francine stepped in, her face softening. Come on, Celeste. You can't fix this here. Celeste clung to the armrest. Please, Robert. Just one more chance. I met her gaze, cold as steel. No more chances. No more games. This chapter is closed. Francine pulled her gently to her feet. I opened the door. As they crossed the threshold, I added, and Celeste, next time you want to decorate someone else's life, use your own damn china. Her sob echoed down the walk. I shut the door, locked it, sat in the silence, and felt nothing. No triumph, no glee, just relief. Clarissa's warning had been clear. Legal consequences were coming. But the real sentence? Social exile. Celeste had built her world on appearances. Now, not even Francine would host her long-term. And Martin? From what I heard, he lawyered up fast, throwing Celeste under the proverbial bus. Smart man. Coward, but smart. I poured a bourbon, sat on the porch, watched twilight creep in. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about one grand gesture. It's about turning the world upside down, then stepping back as gravity does the rest. But one piece of the puzzle still nagged at me. Clarissa's phrase, the rest of the pieces are in motion. What exactly did she mean? I'd soon find out. And when I did, well, let's just say the final twist would be the sharpest yet. The thing about watching someone fall isn't the moment they trip. It's what they grab for on the way down. After that porch scene with Celeste, I figured the dust was starting to settle. But like any good storm, there was always one more crack of thunder waiting. It came 3 days later. An embossed envelope slipped into my mailbox. No stamp. No postmark. Hand-delivered. I opened it with a butter knife, more curious than cautious. Inside, a formal invitation. Clarissa's words, crisp and clear. Mr. Robert Masters, I cordially invite you to attend the upcoming Garden Club Leadership Brunch. Your presence would be most welcome as the guest of honor. Guest of honor? Now that was rich. But curiosity won. I RSVP'd with a simple note. I'll be there. When the day arrived, I dressed sharp. Same charcoal suit. Same navy tie. Consistency matters. The brunch was held at Clarissa's estate, a grand affair. White tents. Silver cutlery. Crystal pitchers of lemonade that probably cost more than my first car. As I arrived, heads turned. Some with respect. Some with poorly masked scorn. I didn't care. Clarissa greeted me personally. Robert, she smiled. Thank you for coming. Wouldn't miss it, I replied evenly. We moved through pleasantries until the real moment came, dessert. Clarissa stood, tapping her glass. Friends, she began. Before we conclude, a few words. She gestured to me. I'd like to recognize Robert Masters, whose integrity and courage brought certain matters to light. Polite applause. A few scattered glares. Then the twist. And as transparency begets more transparency, she continued, voice cool, it seems there is one final piece to reveal. She produced a small, familiar object. A second Wedgwood plate. My heart stopped. Identical to mine, except for a fine hairline crack, expertly repaired. She held it up. This plate was submitted anonymously, she said, accompanied by documents confirming that certain items were copied, substituted, or forged for sale. Gasps. Whispers. Clarissa's gaze swept the crowd. Fraud, she said softly, is an ugly business. And then the hammer blow. An audit of Mr. Hughes's transactions revealed multiple antique forgeries traced back to private sales. Our own Celeste Masters facilitated several. Dead silence. Celeste, pale as linen, stood at the fringe frozen. Clarissa continued. These findings have been submitted to the appropriate authorities. The Garden Club will, of course, cooperate fully. She turned to me, eyes sharp. And Robert, you should know. The original plate you recovered was not the only casualty. This has been quite the operation. I stood slowly, met her gaze. I appreciate your thoroughness, I said. Clarissa's smile was thin as paper. Justice requires it. And with that, the brunch resumed, as if a bomb hadn't just gone off under the linen-draped tables. I left quietly, but not before passing Celeste. She looked at me, eyes rimmed red, voice barely a whisper. You knew. I paused. No. But I suspected you were deeper in than a few borrowed vases. Tears welled up. Robert, I never meant. I cut her off. You meant every step, Celeste. You just didn't mean to get caught. And with that, I walked away. Later that evening, as dusk painted the sky, I poured my bourbon and settled on the porch. Clarissa's envelope lay beside me, now empty. I reflected on her final words as I left. Sometimes, Robert, the best revenge is not just exposing the truth, it's letting them live with it. And I agreed. No lawsuit. No more grand displays. Just the cold permanence of public shame. The club would remember. The town would whisper. Celeste's world, the one she'd so carefully curated, lay in shards, swept aside like broken china. And me? I was free. No victory lap. No triumph. Just a man on his porch, glass in hand, watching the wind stir the garden leaves. Sometimes, that's all the closure you need. Some victories you announce. Others you simply allow to exist. This was the latter. After Susan's failed, restoring elegance seminar collapsed into obscurity, the game was, for all practical purposes, complete. No final confrontation required. No dramatic declarations. The worst fate in her world wasn't ruin, it was irrelevance. And now, that was exactly where she found herself. I allowed the weeks to pass in calm observation. At the club, life continued, as it always had. Membership renewals were strong. The lounge remained at capacity most nights. New reciprocal agreements with elite clubs from London and Vienna elevated our standing even further. Susan's name did not cross a single member's lips, because power, properly exercised, erases the unworthy from the collective memory. But there remained one final detail I wished to address. The lounge. Though thoroughly cleansed, physically and reputationally, it deserved a lasting marker. A private reminder. I commissioned a small brass plaque, tasteful, discreet. In this room, let integrity be the measure of all who enter. It was mounted inside the door frame, visible only as one entered. A message. Not just to members. To myself. Because power, without principle, corrodes. And I had no intention of allowing the corrosion to reach me. One afternoon, perhaps 2 months post-scandal, Marco approached me with an update. Susan sold the studio. Left town, he said quietly. Where to? No one certain. Word is she's headed west. New start. I nodded. Let her. I replied. The game was not about pursuit. It was about containment. And Susan was now well contained, her name a cautionary tale in the circles that mattered most. The club's leadership board, ever sensitive to reputational risk, issued a quiet memo reinforcing our guest and member conduct policies. The message was clear. No guest, regardless of status, may presume immunity from the club's standards of decorum and integrity. In simpler terms, betray trust here, and you will not be forgiven. The phrasing was mine, and it was adopted without objection. One evening, as autumn began to touch the city, I hosted a private dinner in the lounge. A dozen members, old guard and rising figures alike. At the end of the evening, one of the more seasoned members, an industrialist I'd known for years, approached me. Hell of a year, he said, sipping his brandy. Indeed. He studied me. You handled it well. No noise. No mess. Just order restored. That's the only way to handle such things, I replied. He raised his glass. To order. We drank. That was the moment I knew the board was set, and would remain so. Because the greatest strength in such circles is not wealth. It is reputation, reinforced by the quiet certainty that betrayal carries a cost. Susan would learn this anew, wherever she landed. Every introduction, every new connection, would come with a shadow. Wasn't she the one from that club scandal? Didn't she lose everything in a single night? Is she really someone you can trust? That's the true legacy of a well-played endgame. It lingers. Soft, but inescapable. And it requires no further action. One evening, perhaps a season later, I sat alone in the lounge, the plaque gleaming softly by the door. Marco brought my usual. Quiet night, sir, he said. The best kind, I replied. And it was. Because power, once exercised cleanly, requires no further demonstration. It simply is. As I sipped my scotch, the thought came in not bitter, not smug. Simply true. Some betrayals demand fury. Others demand exposure. But the rarest demand patience, the discipline to allow a structure to collapse under its own weakness. Susan had built hers on appearances. I had built mine on principle. And when the reckoning came, the difference was plain for all to see. I rose, surveyed the room, and left the lounge in silence, The kind of silence that speaks volumes. Susan's chapter was closed. Mine remained unwritten. And in the world I commanded, that was the greatest victory of all. The club endures. The board is clean. The stage remains mine. Always. The end. Subscribe to the channel